Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a series of oppositions that are happening over the course of the next week between the Sun in Cancer and Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in Capricorn. So let me give you a look at this first, and then I'll dive into discussing how you might notice the effects of this transit both personally and collectively. Okay, so first of all, this is the transit of the month, I would argue, in addition to the eclipses, because it's all happening across the Capricorn and Cancer axis this month, and this is a huge series of transits. Um, First of all, let's just kind of broadly circle the Sun in Cancer right there, and then broadly highlight the opposition that the Sun will be making to all of the planets down here in Capricorn: Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. Now watch what's going to happen. Here's the beginning of the week. The Sun passes through the opposition to Jupiter first at 22 degrees, then Pluto at 23 degrees. Then by the 20th, on Monday, we have a new moon, which is the start of a new lunar cycle, and that's opposing Saturn almost exactly. So what to expect not only from the week ahead, but from the next lunation cycle? There's a lot to say because about how important this transit is, because it's toning the next lunar cycle as well. So I'm going to try to keep this really simple, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the most basic features of this, which are that we have the Sun opposing a whole boatload of planets in Saturn's sign, and the opposition itself is also of the nature of Saturn, and Saturn is the most empowered planet of the group by virtue of being in its home sign. So we have a classic Sun-Saturn dynamic. And you could differentiate it further, but since it's happening so quick, boom, 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 and then the new moon is opposite Saturn, I'm going to kind of focus on the Saturnine theme. Oppositions are of the nature of Saturn, and the Sun is the natural planetary contrary of Saturn by virtue of the Sun ruling Leo and its opposite sign, Aquarius, being ruled by Saturn. The lights in general, including the moon, who rules Cancer, is also opposed by Saturn by virtue of the rulership that Saturn has over Capricorn. So the lights are naturally opposite Saturn, who represents darkness. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, in the week ahead, you could see lights going out or lights being darkened. Now, let's talk about what different versions there are of light. Let's talk about it first in terms of health, where you could see challenges to health, challenges to vitality, challenges to your sense of wellness and sunshine. So it could be a little depressive or even oppositional, someone trying to thwart your light, thwart your happiness. Not even just someone, but something or a situation or something within yourself. So there's health as a light. The other thing that represents light would be anyone or anything that holds a position of central importance, a leader, a father or a king. But this could also be queens or CEOs who are women, or the matriarch of a family. Doesn't matter. It's whoever's in charge, or whoever's the leader, or whoever's famous, whoever stands out. Sometimes such figures die during these transits, or sometimes their integrity is called into question, or sometimes there'll be a scandal or a fall or a serious letdown. People can fall off pedestals during this time. And this would extend to include the ego. Our ego is the center of our own little universe. It's the little king or queen, inside of us. And so our egos can experience some form of opposition or hostility that may knock us off from a pedestal that we put ourselves on. And, that correction can be the best thing in the world. In Bhakti, we say, I live to be corrected. Because how can I grow if I'm not a being who's capable of growing, then what chance for growth is there? So live to be corrected, not live to be stepped on or put down, but live to improve, live for the sake of not thinking I've got it all figured out, I'm everything I could possibly be, but live from the space of saying, I could get better at things. So this could be a great thing. Maybe it's challenging, maybe there's opposition. Opposition isn't always nice either. For example, you could get a review at work that really gives you great advice. It's very humbling, it's difficult, It's a performance review of some kind, let's say. You know it's right. You know what makes it really hard is when someone says it in a way that's really crappy. Then it's like, okay, you said it, but you were really mean. So correction of the ego, correction of the leader, correction of the thing, that person, or that place that holds central position of authority. A performance review, an opportunity to change and grow, an opportunity to come off our own pedestals or to be taken down from a pedestal. Those things can be very treacherous, but if we have a humble attitude, then we can receive correction in the right spirit. And we can also differentiate between people who might be trying to take us down just because they don't like that we're shining in some way, or they're envious, or bitter, and people who are trying to offer really good constructive feedback for us in the environment, or the people around us might be offering feedback. We can take that correction and just say, I'm here to become a better person. So I might not happen overnight, but I'm gonna try. Thank you. On the other hand, we can differentiate between the message and the mode of the message. Yes, this is good for correction, but you don't need to be mean. Or in today's world, sometimes someone gets called out and we're very tempted to then demonize them. The correction might be needed, the demonizing may not. Finally, the sun can represent our ideal, or ideals. There's many, right? The ideal marriage, the ideal job, the ideal body, whatever the ideal is. The sun was related to the spirit, the daimon in ancient astrology, that force or presence that works with the soul, bringing it toward its ideal, the ideal fate or destiny of a lifetime. It's that which compels motion in the sky. It's like the sun was associated with that generative motion of the cosmos. It rises, it reaches up to the summit, and then it sets. So all of life does the same cycle that the sun does. It rises up like flowers to a blossom, and they wilt and they fall down. So the sun is related to that which compels motion or impels it. And so it, in that sense, is connected to what motivates us to act. Well, it's an ideal that motivates us to act. The sun rising is rising because it wants to reach the peak, and it reaches the peak because it wants to set, right? So there's always a next phase toward which something is moving. So the sun can represent our ideals, and the ideals can go through opposition, being thwarted, being challenged, being negated, being having some kind of conflict, some kind of intense dialectical that forces or stimulates transformation and change. And often there's a humbling that comes with it, or sometimes there's the need to overcome some kind of malicious attempt to thwart or destroy or damage. Both are part of the picture of the opposition between the sun and 3 planets in Saturn's sign right now. I want to read you guys something. This comes from an astrologer that I followed now and then over the years, and always often appreciate some of the things that he has to say. And this was something that came through a conversation on his Facebook wall, and I thought it was really perfect for excuse me, it was very perfect for this opposition, this week-long opposition, and then again the new moon starting with the new moon opposed to Saturn, starting our next moon cycle. So let's see, scrolling down, get there. Here we go. Okay, here we go. The Nirvana Fallacy is the belief that because something is not completely perfect, it is deeply flawed or even broken. It is very common in economic and political discourse. The Nirvana Fallacy compares actual things with unrealistic, idealized alternatives. It can also refer to the tendency to assume that there is a perfect solution to a particular problem. A closely related concept is the perfect solution fallacy. By creating a false dichotomy that presents one option which is obviously advantageous, while at the same time being completely implausible, a person using the Nirvana Fallacy can attack any opposing idea because it is imperfect. Under this fallacy, the choice is not between real-world solutions. It is rather a choice between one realistic, achievable possibility and another unrealistic solution that could in some way be better. I like this because it speaks to the potential temptation that we face with such transits, which is to see, let's say, ourselves as either perfectly luminous like angels or perfectly corrupt, fallen, trash, demons. How can we grow if we're not somewhere in between? You know what I mean? So um, it's it's very tempting when the sun comes into opposition for the heroic image, the heroic ideal to fall down. But it can also be an invitation for us to look very carefully at what we put on platforms and about the tendency we have to dichotomize between, salvation and damnation and things like that. Grace is always a middle ground that mediates as it sanctifies. And I think for me over the next week, I know that what I'm going to do is just try to open myself to whatever feedback might be there. Sun opposite Pluto, opposite Jupiter, opposite Saturn. There's a potential for, people that I've put it up on a pedestal to come down a notch. For example, my father was recently had to go to the ER. That's as the sun is moving into these oppositions. My dad had to go to the ER for heart problems. So there's the image of my father potentially taking a fall. But there's something about our mortality, about the death of the hero, about the death of our ideals, about the failures and shortcomings that we have. It's really relieving because it turns out the pedestals are very lonely and they're very high up. And so I think this week we could see that we may come off a pedestal, someone else may come off a pedestal. It could be a mortal physical one, it could be a moral or intellectual or spiritual one, political, all sorts of different ways that we can fall, and all different kinds of ways that our egos need adjustment. And there's nice ways of giving and receiving that adjustment, and there are cruel ways of giving and receiving that adjustment if it's necessary. So my encouragement for everyone is the same, encouragement that I'm going to give to myself the next week, which is like, let's just try to remember kindness, compassion, mercy, and forgiveness as we walk through this together and just see what happens. So I would love to hear your stories. Have you any solar figures in your life that your relationship is changing with? How is your own ego receiving the feedback of the universe right now? Whatever else you might want to share, I'd love to hear some of your stories. It's always interesting to read what you guys are up to. So that's what I've got. I hope you're having a great week and look forward to more soon. Take it easy. Bye.